Hi guys, Vaughn here with my special Christmas edition blog on this L7. If you don't know about them, the Lab Series amplifiers were intensely cool amps built mostly during the late 70s, the first year or two of the 80s. They were a Gibson thing designed by, in part by Bob Moog, as I understand it. Anyway, distributed by Gibson. The Lab Series amps consisted of the little L3, which I call it little. It was a 60 watt and honest to God like equal to 62 watts amp with a single 12 and a single channel. And then there was the L5, the L7, and the L9. The L5, L7, and L9 were all the same exact amplifiers. The difference was the speaker complement. And the L5 was probably the one that the most were sold of. It had a pair of 12s. So in other words, it was at 100 watts RMS, true 100 watts. It was very, very, very comparable to the twin reverbs of the day. And of course, you know, in the 70s, the Fender Twin Reverb was kind of the amp to beat, right? The other two configurations that came in were the L9, that was kind of the big dog that had a 15-inch electro voice in it, an EVM 15L, a really cool speaker. And this one, the L7, had 4 10s in it. Okay? I am a huge fan of amps with 4 10-inch speakers. All of my favorite amps, the Tweed Bassmans, the Blackface Supers, push air through 4 10-inch speakers. And I think it's a magical, mystical thing. I don't really understand it, but when you get 4 of those little boogers together, it's pure heaven. Like I said, I don't want to understand it, then the magic would be gone, right? And it's magic. Okay, so as we sit cross-legged on the floor together, I would like to talk a little bit about this L7. This L7 came to me off Craigslist. It was listed as being blown, and they almost paid me to come get it, man. In no time at all, I realized that the amp was not blown, but all 4 speakers were. Now, the crazy thing is that of the 4 speakers that were in this amp, only one of them was actually the original speaker, and it was the one that was still sort of working. There were 2 speakers in it that were old, really, really, really low wattage Alnico speakers, probably out of, you know, like an old home stereo, you know, like an old console stereo or something. I mean, literally, these speakers were probably rated into like 5 to maybe 8 watts a piece range. No wonder they blew, right? And the other one was, I don't know what it was, the worst speaker I'd ever seen in my life. On the back, it said like professional model speaker, and it was just awful. Those were completely, I mean, insanely blown. So I put new speakers in it, and voila, she lives. What I have in it right now, by the way, are 4 of the WGS Veteran 10s. I love those speakers because just like they're lightweight speakers, they're very quick, nimble, articulate speakers. On their own, they're pretty thin and don't have a whole bunch of bottom end, but when you gang them up in a series of 4, they do just what low-power speakers in a Super do or in a Bassman do, which is that magical, mystical thing where they have a big, huge, 3-dimensional sound stage with a big, beautiful, warm bottom end and the incredible chimey top end and articulation that can only come from 10-inch speakers. Okay, so 4 Vet 10s are what's in here right now. You know what? I don't normally go through the controls when I do an amp review because I figure there's like a million of them out there and everybody knows what it is. But the truth is, these Lab Series are a little bit unusual these days. They were only sold for like 5 years, the late 70s and into the first year or two of the 80s, and that was it. Again, Gibson, designed by Bob Moog and a few other people, and they are very much like they feel like a Fender amp. To someone like me who's used to playing on Fender amps, these feel like Fender amps. It has the same Accutronics long spring reverb unit that is in vintage Fenders, like a Super Reverb, for instance. So the reverb sounds wonderful, sounds absolutely marvelous. They have 2 channels. just like, again, a vintage Fender. And just like a Fender, channel 1 is a little bit more of the plain Jane channel, and channel 2 adds a few more bells and whistles. Channel 1 has volume, bass, mid-range, and treble, and a bright switch. Sounds a whole bunch like a Fender, doesn't it? And here is something to know, if you don't already, about these Lab Series amplifiers. They have a high and a low input, again, just like a Fender. However, they're exactly reversed. They are backwards from a Fender. The one that's labeled high means that it's looking for a high level input. The one that is low means it is looking for a low level input. Okay? So like active, lots of output, the thought was put it in the one that says high. And what that means is the one that says low actually has more gain. You following me on that? Loudest input is the one that says low. Quietest input is the one that says high. Okay? Oh, and by the way, the low one also has a little bit more brilliance to it. A little bit more airy brightness to it. Okay. Second channel gets a little bit freaky. It's a little bit different. Deviates just a little bit. We're seeing Bob Moog's influence here. We've got volume, bass, and now we have a fully parametric mid-range control where you can boost or cut frequencies from 100 hertz up to 6.4 kilohertz. And then a treble control. The bass and the treble are centered just like on this channel and just like you would expect. And then there is this thing called the multi-filter, which is very much like a standard Moog filter, right? Honestly, I don't like them. What it does is it progressively filters out more and more and more frequencies. I'll show you that in just a minute. I never use it. Reverb control, and then on the end, it actually does have an optical compressor. Now, I'm not a compressor guy, and I never use this. I've played around with it a little bit, and you can sort of get a little bit of that Ray Flack chicken picking, Brent Mason sound when you crank the compressor up and get into where it's really pulling you in like that. That's not my thing, and so I don't use it. If it's your thing, you're probably going to like the compressor, okay? And I've got the master set right now on about 3, the channel set on about 3, and I'm through this low input, okay? And the volume we're at right now is, I'm going to call it sort of low stage level, okay? I'm going to start out with between the neck and the middle pickup, the stuff that I really, really, really like to do. You've heard me do it a million times if you've heard any of my demos, so I apologize. What I'm looking for here is I want a nice, juicy, warm bottom, airy highs that don't bite, and nice touch sensitivity, right? So in other words, so I can go like... And I've got another video where I compare this amp to my old 67 Super Reverb, and I can tell you, man, this amp is closer to sounding like a Super, a blackface Super Reverb than any amp I've ever found, and yes, it is, ladies and gentlemen, solid state. Okay, so there, I've said the S word. I'm sorry, but it's true. I tell you what, though, these are... I was getting ready to say the best sounding solid-state amps you'll ever hear. The honest-to-God truth is they're some of the best amps you'll ever hear, period. So let me do a few other things. While I'm on clean, I'm going to do my, my bridge and middle thing. Again, I'm looking for real touch sensitivity here. Standard disclaimer, I'm not a great player, I know tone. Okay, now let's go to pure old on the bridge stuff. Lots of telly-twang going on there. Oh, by the way, the amazing 6 pickup, oh, I'm sorry, 5 pickup Stratocaster. If I can figure out a place, I'll make it a 6. Has both single coil and humbucking available in both the neck and the bridge position. Learn more about it on another blog. So there you go. Again. That's just the middle pickup, the Strat pickup. And what reverb we're hearing, of course, is just the reverb on here. Oh, hey, let me do you a little surf thing, just to show. Again, this is the same tank that's in the classic Fenders, so it surfs right with the Fender, baby. So, you know, great reverb, can surf with the best of them. I tell you what, the amps, you get distortion out of this the old-fashioned way by cranking the pre-gain and then pulling the master back, right? And its distortion is okay, but I prefer to use it the same way I would use my classic, vintage, non-master volume Fenders, and that means that, that I like to just go ahead and get my grit from pedals, okay? I get this set up to where the front end is sounding just like, you know, a Bassman or a Super, you know, when it's just like right there to where it's at the very end of holding on clean and just starting to give you a little grease, you know what I mean? So let me show you first the the tube screamer type sound here. Oh, by the way, we are up in the neck pickup here. Oh, I'll do the thing I always do. There you go. And now down to the bridge pickup on Humbucker for like the Okay, so that's Tube Screamer basically. It's a bad monkey. Let's go up. We're gonna up the ante on the grit here, and go with like full on. This is basically like, you know, JCM 900 kind of gain here. Again, just fine. I mean, takes pedals like an old tube amp does. And here is and here's a gnarly old gritty old super distortion sound. Oh, here, dig. American woman, try it before me. Yeah, man. It loves that stuff. And finally, I tell you what, let's go up to the neck humbucker here. These guys do great on like big, you know. Definitely can do the jazz thing, and with 100 watts, man, they can stay as clean as you want them to stay on up to big stage level. So there you go, man. I think I'm going to end it with that. Oh, you know what? I promised I told you I would give you a little multi-filter deal. So let's go. I'm going to go to that same sound I was doing and start cranking the multi-filter up. Okay. Here it is on 4, up to about 7. And all the way up. So it's like, yeah, kind of wah-wah pedally sounding. The way I look at it, that's the suck control. When you have it at its minimum position, there's no suck at all. The higher up it goes, the more it sucks. The only thing I could see that before is if you wanted, you know, a little effect at some point where you wanted kind of a lo-fi guitar sound. I don't know. Maybe somebody out there is using it for something different. Maybe Bob Moog was just smoking dope when he came up with that. I mean, hey, it was the 70s, right? Actually, it was probably the 60s when he was doing that. I rest my case. Okay, so there you go, man. The Lab Series L7... Oh, I've got an L9 waiting in the wings, by the way, so you will be seeing that as well. And I'm going to do a shootout between the L7, the L9, and my beautiful, trusty old Blackface Super Reverb. Using my handy-dandy little magic wand remote to say goodbye to you all. Hey, thanks for sitting in for all this.